I have some stuff that I think can dovetail with this, and then I'll give it to you, Nate, to ask your question about knowing, because my question also relates to knowing and knowing as a kind of eros or deeply um, bound up with eros. So if you could just describe for our viewers, Dr. Schindler, why it is that Plato associates love and reason, love and eros,
Hmm.
and do you think that the decoupling, this is a second order question, second
Yes.
question. Do you think the decoupling of love and reason produces notions of freedom and of the will, which are basically akin to what you describe in your works of political theology, where freedom is described as being liberated from constraints, even those of reality itself?
That's right. Yes. I mean, yes, and the why Plato connects love and reason is, I mean, it's a mysterious thing to me. It's one of the things that led me to write that book. I found it so intriguing that he made the good the cause of knowledge. You would think, okay, the true or being, but he makes specifically the good, and that really intrigued me, and it struck me as something profound and necessary, and I wanted to understand it better. So that really was one of the basic questions that drove me. And it seems to me, and this is something that I'm not yet finished thinking about. I mean, I hope always to continue thinking about it. But one of the things that has become clearer and became clear working on that book is the connection between in a way we're already touching on this, the or let me put it this way, the essentially self-transcending character of reason, that has something to do with reason's rootedness in the good. If it were simply registering information, in a way, it would never have to come outside of itself. It would just sort of record what it receives, and there would be a kind of passivity to it. Um, but the connection with the good makes it clear that reason is seeking not just to understand, and you might say comprehend and internalize the form of things, but in fact to enter into them, and to the act of knowing has to somehow enter into, penetrate, you might say, into the being of things, in order for us to be able to say, yes, in fact, we know them, that there's got to be a presence there. And that movement out to the being of things, I think, is what shows that the act of reason has an erotic structure, an ecstatic structure of its essence. Now, I think there are other arguments one can add to that. I remember my mentor in graduate school, Eric Pearl. You're probably familiar with him. Really phenomenal, one of the great philosophers that I've had the privilege of getting to know. He made an argument that, in terms of teleology, that we don't really know something until we know its purpose, and we don't really know its purpose, and to know the purpose of a thing is to know it precisely as an image of the good, and therefore the knowledge is always in a way of participating in the good. I think that that's true, but I think that this ecstatic dimension is really a crucial one. So, remind me briefly the second part of your question, because I just gave a
Yeah,
one-word answer to that.
no problem. Yeah, the question was just, do you think that the decoupling of
Oh, right.
reason
Yes.
from eros leads to a kind of notion of will and of freedom that
Yes.
is basically diabolical?
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting. I mean, that's exactly right. I think you end up getting a very flattened version of reason, which is what I was just speaking about. But one can flip that over and say that in fact you also get a very flattened, impoverished, and then ultimately, I think a kind of a radically self-subverting notion of freedom at the same time. The freedom and reason go profoundly, they're profoundly intrinsic to each other, especially if once you recognize that the good is the cause of the truth of things, and the good is also Plato didn't use the language of freedom so frequently. It's a much more marginal term there, but he talked about things that we would associate with freedom, and he described them um, in precisely in relation to, in this intrinsic relation to knowledge. And if I may just for a moment here, I find it interesting that the passage that one of the famous lines from Socrates, I think, is profoundly misunderstood, which is his identification of virtue and knowledge. To know the good is to do the good. For the most part, people think that that's an intellectualist reduction of freedom, and the problem is that that interpretation takes for granted a dualism between freedom and knowing. And it seems to me that for Plato, you don't know something unless you're already actually loving it, and that's why virtue and knowledge go together. But that's also why reason and freedom are essential to each other.
Yeah,
It would be a much longer discussion to talk about the precise way in which freedom would then degenerate into a diabolical form. But that would take us
yeah,
beyond Plato. But I think it's a
right.
really important point.